Vaishnavi Sundar is a writer and self-taught filmmaker from Chennai. Through her films, she advocates for the rights of women and girls worldwide. She founded Lime Soda Films about a decade ago with the aim of highlighting themes of male violence, women's empowerment, and education. Tonight, she'll be talking to us about the making of the documentary which she has just released about trans widows, Behind the Looking Glass.
Hello, sisters. Thank you so much for having me. So I just want to quickly give you an overview about the making of the documentary Behind the Looking Glass. Some of you might have watched it. If you haven't, it's available on YouTube and on X. Please watch it and share it wherever possible. So basically, the idea for this project started about 3 years ago, around September in 2021. I had finished dysphoric and I was just figuring out what to do next. I hadn't really decided on what topic to touch upon. And I knew for a fact that whichever project it was that I was going to take is going to take a few years of my life. So I was being very careful about what topic to choose. Now, when I was making Dysphoric, there was a thought that was lingering on my mind about what is happening to the partners of these women that I'm speaking to, the detransitioners that I'm speaking to. But then, of course, I am not interested in making any project about men. If they are in a heterosexual relationship, I am not interested in making any film about men at all. So I was wondering if the alternative situation, what would happen when these men announce their female identity? What is going to happen to these wives and children that they leave behind? Now, that idea kind of lingered, and after Dysphoric release, and after a lot of people had watched it, I started getting, I frequently get emails from mothers and detransitioners themselves saying that the film has been useful in understanding what is going on, etc. But then I also received a few emails from women who said that they were affected in a slightly different manner. So they had their partners who claimed that they are now female and they just chose to abandon their family and leave their children behind. Now, the thought that was there in the back of my mind started playing right in front of me at that time, and I was wondering whether there is any possibility at all that there will be enough people interested in talking to me. Forget making the film, forget even collecting enough information, but I was just wondering, within the gender ideology landscape, I think this seems like a very difficult conversation that you'd have with somebody, because detransitioners, though it is never enough, have received some amount of publicity in that major mainstream media has talked about their experience, about their regret and things like that, but not enough about the families that transit people who transition leave behind, be it male or female. Now I thought there might not be any interest at all, and especially to some complete stranger who's sitting in India who's requesting to talk about some of the most mm, intimate and dangerous thing that they had experienced. I didn't think that it would be possible for me to get enough women interested in this at all. But then I was absolutely wrong. I not only had interest from women who went through this, word got around, and they then encouraged other women to talk to me. And then, just like that, I had already spoken to about 50 women. And obviously, all 50 couldn't be in the film. And even the ones that could be in the film had a lot of difficulty in terms of dangers from their exes, even though they are now separated. Some of them hadn't separated, so they had to be really careful about when they discussed these things with me, because it seemed like the husband always knew and he was hovering around. There were situations where women canceled Zoom conversations with me for like 10, 12 times. But then I understood why, because it somehow the man knew that she's doing something and he just wanted to interrupt it. So I waited patiently and I did talk to all of them. At one point, I had like this really big list of women that I had spoken to from around the world. And I was wrong in also thinking that these women will find it difficult to talk about. It was like they were waiting for somebody to ask them how they are feeling about it. And once I did, it was like they just talked. And that's how simple it was. And all it needed for them was just for someone to go and ask them how they are feeling about this whole experience, what had happened, what really went down, how did they manage to survive, how did they get away from it, what did they do about the custody of children, were the children abused, were some of the children also hijacked by this ideology, because that tends to happen a lot. When one of the parents do this, the children feel that they have to somehow appease the parent who's transitioning, and they themselves go down this rabbit hole. And it is the case for a bunch of women who I have interviewed in the film as well. So with all of these things in my mind, I was still very skeptical about the possibility of turning this into a film project that will be palatable and we get the message across in a way that people understand that there is really this demographic that has been silenced. And how do I present it knowing that there is so much of violence and abuse that's going on behind closed doors? So, with the choice of making this film, there were also some decisions that I had to make. Like some women could be public about their experience because some of them are now in their, say, 60s or 70s, and all of these things happened to them when they were in their 20s. Not that it gets any easier at all, but they were willing to be public about it. They had already spoken about this openly, so they were very happy to do that. And there were a bunch of other women as well who wanted desperately for their story to be heard. And they're such phenomenal speakers as well. But it's just that they had the risk of being identified by their partner, so they had to be very careful. And of course, that's why the whole animation and the whole trying to change their voice and everything was happening behind closed doors. That's also one of the reasons why the film took so long. And I was definitely sure that I wasn't going to have one of those things where, if you have a woman who chooses to be anonymous, you see this silhouette, this dark shadow woman sitting in a corner. You wouldn't even be able to hear what she's saying. I didn't want it to be a film like that. I wanted the living room to be very bright. I wanted the living room to have like all of happy things, like a cat or a dog or, different things like that. So I made sure that I spent time in making sure that their living room looks really absolutely a happy place for them, because that is how I was hoping that they would feel now that all of this is behind them. So that happened, and I had to split between the publicly speaking trans widows and the anonymous trans widows. I have an immense amount of respect for both of them. Now, there were a lot of difficulty in terms of finding animators as well. There were only few creative people within our radical feminist circles who are happy to participate in a project like this with me and open turf, because guilt by association is apparently such a taboo and nobody wants to have anything to do with me at all. So all the erstwhile friends that I used to have as a filmmaker when I was not doing openly turfy stuff, they were just inaccessible to me. I would find out about it only when I tried to write to them on WhatsApp, and I realized that they had already blocked me. So I went online and posted advertisements in all of these websites where animators and creative people post their work and ask public to, get in touch with them. So I would write to them and I would say, this is what the project is about. Many of them would just blatantly say to me, sorry, this is not a project that I want to be associated with, and you should be ashamed of yourself for even choosing to make a film about this. So then that was that. And then there were some who said, well, I understand why you think this film is important and I wish you luck, but somehow I can't be part of it at all. But then miraculously, I also found this one animator who is from Pakistan, actually. She had not a lot of idea about the dangers of this ideology, but then we had a conversation and I explained all of these things to her. One of two things were going to happen. She's going to say no, or she's going to get piqued. She got piqued. And then we worked on this project together and she made one of the characters for me. There was still a lot of difficulty in working together as a team because I'm just one person. Lion Soda Films, it's just me. And people come together for a project and then they dismember and they do their own thing. And all these women have their jobs and things like that. So I had to basically rely on their free time, a free time where they also have to do things that they want to do. So it took a really long time. And finally, it seemed like a film was seeming like it was coming together as a film. And then there were also other difficulties like making sure that their voice are changed and, hunting for a studio that would let me use it. And apparently my turfy reputation precedes me, so a lot of people who are not interested in working with me in other departments as well. So after all of that, it seemed like it was possible. And in the middle, there was also this risk of me wondering whether I would make enough money to be able to pay the animators, to pay the studio, and it's all massive expenses. It's one thing to, ask women to come together and do this because it's an important cause, but I don't believe in not paying women for their labor at all. So no matter what, I was very clear that even if I'm not going to get paid, or if even if I don't raise enough for myself or my salary or anything that has got to do with me, I should be able to raise enough where I don't have to give out of my pocket. And thankfully, women came forward. A lot of women from around the world just came together and donated generously, and the film was possible. to come out and for us to be able to watch it. Now, in the process of making this film, there were also a couple of challenges that I was experiencing, where there were ongoing legal challenges that these women were having with their ex-partners at that time. So a lot of them had to pull out in the middle of having talked to me, having agreed to be in the film and things like that. And then suddenly they realized that it is going to be such a huge problem if they go ahead and participate in a project like this. Mostly, they weren't concerned about them as much as they were concerned about the children and the child custody issues. The partner was obviously very cleverly menacing her, using the children as the bait in this whole scheme of things. So that was happening as well. And until the film got over and released, I was still running the risk of any woman having the similar issue, where even if they are anonymous, some of them could just say, no, absolutely not, just take me out of the film. And for a project like this, with such a delicate domestic violence issue at hand, I didn't even have the heart to ask them to sign like a release form or something like that, that once they speak with me, then I'm free to use their voice in any way. I wanted them to have the liberty to say no to it at any given point in time, which is praying that when I was like still well into the project, nobody would, choose to opt out of being part of the project. Thankfully, none of that happened. Whenever it did happen, it was still at a stage where I could salvage with the rest of the footage that we had. Um, there was, there is also this question that I get asked a lot. Now, in the film, there are women from Australia, there are women from USA, UK, Europe, and Japan. And I get asked a lot about the possibility of me showing any Indian trans widow. Now, there are a lot of problems with that, because in India, we don't even understand the terminology trans widow. And also because of lack of one common language across the country, it becomes really difficult for us to unify as one unit in the first place. So I have to really educate the crowd, if I know their language at all in the first place, and make them understand that these are all the things that happen. Having said that, I know these things do happen because there are a lot of these online forums on Reddits and things like that, where we have Indian men very clearly married and probably have children, who call themselves sluts and call themselves sissies and things like that. It's called Indian sissies. It's all there online. You know that these men exist, and therefore their wives are being abused and the children are being abused. You know that this is happening. It's just that nobody can associate themselves to this terminology called trans widow. And even if they do, I don't think we are ready yet for women to come forward and talk about their experience on this issue. A large majority of these things happen in a place where it's probably very rural, or they're poverty stricken themselves, so the woman is not educated and things like that. And she doesn't have the vocabulary to explain what's going on. She doesn't understand that this is an added layer of violence against women. She just thinks it's just domestic violence. This is how things work in India. So she isn't able to come forward and speak about this. There are a few legal cases that were ongoing where women were granted divorce on the basis of the fact that this man, the then ex-husband, chose to change sex. Now, the reason behind that is not because the court was feeling generous or cared about women enough for their well-being enough that they were now granting a divorce from this abusive man. No. In Indian law, Hindu Marriage Act, or even the Special Marriage Act, marriage happens between male and female. So when one person claims to not be male anymore, the marriage by default becomes void. So the granting of the divorce becomes easier. And also because we follow a model where the victim is far removed from the system, it always becomes about the perpetrator versus the state. So it's very hard for you to identify who the victim is, even if you have that kind of a resource to go find her, hunt her, and ask her if she would share her experience with me. That's not possible. What is also happening in India, and I try to wrap it up, what is also happening in India is a lot of these men with perversions and depraved behaviors, they go to psychologists and psychotherapists and they say that they are having issues with their wife or something like that. And they start doing really weird things, including but not limited to talking in a way that it was of sexual nature, or touching themselves inappropriately and things like that. So these men exist in India and these women exist in India. It's just that I have probably made this film a little too early for an Indian context. And hopefully at some point, somebody will reach out and say that their husband has done this. I should say that an Indian woman who is living abroad with a white husband as well as an Indian husband, two different women. Two different women with one white husband, one Indian husband. They got in touch with me saying that this is happening to them, but they were all born outside of India. So I assume that this experience has been purely motivated based on what they see in the country that they're living in right now. So also they couldn't be part of the project, so I couldn't include them or even mention them. So that's the thing about India. And after all of this, the film got released on the 30th of August. It's about to be a month right now. YouTube has barely left our film online, but it has done all sorts of, it has made it very difficult for people to find the film, because if you type the word behind the looking glass, or if you even type the words behind the looking glass Vaishnavi Sundar documentary, you just don't seem to find it. You find all kinds of other videos that, some trans identified males have reviewed the project or something like that. Those kind of videos appear, or any other interview that I might have done where they have used similar. So what they have to do is basically they have to come, look for sort of films, search the video. These are all extra steps that people might feel just dissuaded to just, not bother with watching the film, right? And that's what they want. They haven't taken the video down, but they've made it really difficult for them to find. So that's in a way a kind of censorship. And they have told me, well, that they're not going to be giving me ad revenues, though they will use ads in our film. They said that they will not give any ad revenue to us because this film is not suitable for their advertisers. And the ads that do show up while the video is playing, while our film is playing, are ads that are very pro gender identity. And that really gets on my nerves. So overall, it's the same story. Women's labor is being used by men, and women's labor is exploited by men, and so on and so forth. But one good thing that has come out of all of these things is people are really starting to talk about trans widows and the abuse that the children face in the hands of parents who claim to want to transition. A lot of people are writing to me privately, sending me emails and saying things like they thought they knew enough about this issue, but when they watched the film is when they truly understood how difficult it is. And in every podcast, in every interview, and every opportunity that I get where I am able to talk about this film or about the experience of trans widows, I want everybody to remember that this is domestic violence at the primal level. And if we can talk about that and stress about the fact that this is domestic violence, I think we might have some success in speaking more about this issue, because the abuser is trans identified, therefore you are having a gag order against speaking about the violence that you're facing. It wouldn't be the case if the husband was not trans identified. So how come there is this difference? Suddenly does a trans identified man's behavior become normalized? Is that okay for him to hit his wife? Somehow I don't seem to understand that. So I'm insisting that we all understand this as a form of domestic violence, male violence against women, and keep talking, asking questions as to why these women are abused and nobody wants to talk about it. Is it because the husband is trans? Is it okay then if the husband is a rapist? Is it okay if a husband is a child beater, a wife beater? How is it that we're not able to talk about it? And we need to ask stakeholders to take accountability within your own states, within your own countries. You ask them to, if they give these stunning and brave men enough airtime, that they should be able to do the same thing for these wives. It's just even out of idle curiosity, right? What is it that these women are feeling? How is it that the only women that are getting represented in media are the ones that are now fully affirming him and are claiming themselves to be lesbians? So there are a lot of questions that need to be asked, and a film is just not enough to do that, but a film can be a great tool to do that. So I urge all of you to use this film as your own, screen it wherever you want, use it as a conversation starter, send it to your friends, show it to your MPs, anything. The film is ours. I consider this to be a part of like this massive resource that we have. Use it, screen it wherever you want. And if you have any questions for me at all about screening it, or wanting me to come and talk to you, having some trans widows come and talk to any of the program that you might be having, just please contact me, because these voices are silenced in a way that it has shocked me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know women are flooding the screen with hearts and applause, because we all wish we could send you hearts and applause. I think of what the women that you're describing have been through, and I have seen the movie twice. I think of this as like a form of coercive control, and I think you are absolutely right that we need to be able to describe that. So thank you very much.